If you saw our video yesterday, we tried to show off how the Bone Break charm in Diablo 2 could be used to double Thorns damage being taken by a source by reducing your own physical damage reduction. Trying it out on the paladin, a lot of people saying like, oh hey, where was the video footage? Like, why didn't you show the Diablo kill? And the answer was because the paladin was pretty terrible. I just recorded something earlier today. I'm going to throw that up as like a short video just so you can see it. But the long and short of it is there was no real way for the paladin by themselves to really survive and thrive in this scenario. And they actually died multiple times, even just clearing up to Chaos Sanctuary and getting to Diablo himself. So what I wanted to do was try to attack this from a different angle. One of the problems was being able to apply amplify damage consistently. And why worry about that when you can just cast amplify damage? Another thing was having enough bodies that could actually survive being attacked. And well, again, the Necromancer kind of solves that problem for you in the summoning tree. And then lastly, there was no real way to get AoE damage applied to anything. And well, that's where Poison Nova when struck and on striking come in, when you can also synergize those on the Necromancer. I know people were pointing out, hey, try out the Necromancer, and let me run you through what we tried, what we worked out, and kind of what our conclusions were, trying to abuse this new mechanic where intentionally lowering your own physical damage reduction could make Thorns twice as deadly. So what you're looking at is what I thought would be the best version of a Thorns Necromancer build that's going to abuse Poison Nova as well as Thorns on as many summons as possible. And well, what you're looking at is just a summon Necromancer. And that was kind of the problem with the build and why I didn't really think it was fair to try to call this a Thorns build at all. Originally, we went with a max raise skeleton along with skeleton mastery. We put a lot of additional points into golem mastery. We only spec'd into the synergies for Poison Nova so that our Endarials and our plague procs would have the most damage possible. And then we get up to a really high level amplified damage so that when we cast it, it hits the entirety of the screen so you don't have to cast it multiple times. And it turns out it's good. Summoner Necromancer is fantastic. The problem is that it was good. Summon a Necromancer is fantastic. The monsters weren't really dying to Thorns damage, they were dying to a max skeleton army with Pride and Infinity, making it so that they hit 95% of the time, and then just the general effect of amplified damage. Being able to telestomp with Enigma, while you'll see in the gameplay if you pay really close attention, there are monsters that are killing themselves on the Thorns aura in general. It is technically increasing your total DPS, it's just nearly impossible to actually track it. And then the second problem that I ran into is that we, the Necromancer, were never really getting attacked. So while with our battle command and bow up, we'd have 3,200 life, total capped maxed res, the monsters were never really hitting us, they were always hitting our skeletons. And since our summons and mercenary don't actually get the minus physical damage reduction from the charms themselves, ultimately it really wasn't doing anything to have this on the build and for us to be running around using Poison Dagger to try to proc additional Poison Novas. Now that being said, and this is kind of the ironic part about it, when farming in places like Chaos Sanctuary, a lot of times your summons are being hit with amplify damage and decrepify from the Oblivion Knights. They are either at minus 100 physical resistance or minus 50 physical resistance from the decrepify. And what that basically means is that your summons at any given time are already kind of taking double damage from any physical damage that they would take. So you, the Necromancer, wearing these charms actually doesn't really net you any additional benefit. Anywhere where you can farm where monsters might be applying curse or decrepify, you're already getting the benefit of this anyways. So adding on the charms to Necromancer isn't adding to that facet of the build. There's nothing wrong with just running a Thorns aura on an Act 2 mercenary, but all in all, just putting on a Might aura would add up to a greater DPS increase in most scenarios than having the Thorns aura up. So while it's a build, it works, it's technically a Thorns proc build, I wanted to try something else so that we could actually rely on this mechanic and I could legitimately say, hey, we made an actual viable minus 100 physical damage reduction build. So that's when I tried out just swapping out a single piece of gear. The key item that we swapped out here was actually the armor Bone. Now, Bone has a couple really interesting stats on it, plus to skills, 30 all res, a little bit of damage mitigation and mana. But the really important part to it is that it will cast a level 10 bone armor when you are struck. Again, one of the problems that we were having on the paladin was getting hit all of those times while doing a lot of damage was also killing us the vast majority of the time. Whereas if we are getting a level 10 bone armor proc, you're looking at around 750 damage that's being eaten up by your bone armor. So let's say it procs and then you get hit one time and you're down to, I don't know, 200 or 300 damage left on the shield. When you get hit that second time, while you're still removing a bit of the damage from your thorns, you're actually able to survive and return a bit of damage on yourself. For the rest of the gear, we were still using Plague both as an option for a weapon to be able to use Poison Dagger to actually hit, an additional source of minus enemy poison res for the Poison Nova procs. That cleansing aura also helps to keep us alive, including our mercenary and our iron golem, which is really important. And then it also is proccing lower res, so while you might think that kind of counteracts the amplified damage, it's nice when the lower res procs, a Poison Nova goes out and then you recast amplified damage. So the Poison Nova is doing maximum damage and you can get that amp up whenever you want. And then that in conjunction with this second source of a level 15 Poison Nova means that on average we were casting a 2,000 to 3,000 poison damage Poison Nova multiple times per fight. The 3-piece Trangs here continues to give us additional parts to our curses that cannot be frozen, which is really important since we intend on running through and being a melee character, and then an additional source of minus enemy res. And then while our Poison Dagger wasn't doing a ton of damage, it was nice to be able to stack a little bit of Crushing Blow and Open Wounds to be able to help for general kill speed against bosses and tankier monsters. And then for the skills, to be able to maximize the getting hit portion of this build, we don't put more than 1 point into bone armor just as a prereq, but we actually max out its synergies so that it's gaining that 20 skill level times 15 additional damage. Because we don't need to actively cast Poison Nova ourselves, and we kind of don't care about the damage on Poison Dagger, it's more so just a delivery method of procs as well as Open Wounds and Crushing Blow. We max out the synergies for Poison Nova, so this is a fully synergized level 15 Poison Nova every single time that it procs. And then in the summon tree, for this version of the build where we wanted the Thorns damage to matter, we're only putting 1 point down into all the summons that are required, and we're putting our dump points into Golem Mastery just so that that Iron Golem would survive better and also have more life so that when he procs his own Thorns damage from his specific aura, he'll be able to survive those attacks as well. And then we stayed on the same mercenary that's going to have access to his own Thorns aura, so a level 32 Thorns aura here again, 14.9 multiplier on any damage that's returned, as well as 344 damage. Whether or not you get hit is also getting returned on those. He's using the Infinity that's going to help us attack more often and actually be able to hit. It's also going to help our summons hit on the initial version of the build. Also going to bring a huge amount of damage to him and the Crushing Blow, as well as Indariel's in Chains of Honor to be able to bump his Thorns aura up as high as it can possibly go. So ultimately, what does this mean for being able to use Bone Break on a Necromancer? And realistically, the answer is you can't really do it. The closest we got was with the bone armor version of it, and while you do survive and your Poison Nova does add a little bit of damage, I think you're hamstringing yourself and needing to get some pretty rare and valuable items to be able to make it okay. So if it doesn't necessarily work as a pure Thorns version on the Paladin, and once you're a Summon Necromancer, you're kind of choosing to just play a bad version of the Summon Necromancer, I'm running out of ideas where you could legitimately abuse this while also surviving. I think I'd like to reinvestigate the Paladin, but work on using Decrepify on an Act 5 mercenary, and let me kind of break down why that doesn't seem to make sense, but actually might be the way to go. The issue with Decrepify itself is that while it will reduce your physical damage reduction by 50%, it also reduces the damage that the monster does by 50%. So if I have a total of minus 100 physical damage reduction, I'm going to take double the damage. But if a monster is only taking 1/2 of the total damage, that cancels itself out. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. On the Paladin, I found it difficult to survive because I was taking too much damage, and I was using Lacerator as a bad way of applying amplified damage. But what if my mercenary had Decrep up the entire time on monsters? Now they're going to swing slower, they're going to cut their own damage in half, but since I'm taking double damage, the net payout here is that monsters are doing their normal base damage, which then gets multiplied by Thorns. Whereas before, monsters would be doing some amount of their damage because you would typically have physical damage reduction on yourself, like a Shaco, Chains of Honor, String of Ears, anything like that. Then you could add on Decrep's minus 50 physical res for the monster itself. And what you end up getting is base monster damage multiplied by Thorns, multiplied by about 1.5. Maybe that's the key. I'll go ahead and try that out. Let me know what you think. We tried out the Necromancer here. Before anybody asks, we did look at Iron Maiden as well, and basically the way that the numbers play out is that max level Iron Maiden is more effective against any monster that has greater than 32 physical damage reduction base. So that's typically like immune to physical damage monsters as well as act bosses. But the damage in DPS between just throwing on amp damage or throwing on Iron Maiden was about 200 DPS against Diablo, so I don't really think it's worth it to try to min-max when you apply Iron Maiden versus when you apply Amplify damage. Let me know if you come to a different conclusion. I'd really like to hear. I feel like there's something here, there's something that we could play with that will add up to, at the very least, like a D tier meme build that actually works. I'm gonna keep digging. I'd love to know what you think, and either way, I appreciate so much that you watched this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.